Hello friends! In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to draw this cute cottage in the clouds. I will share the process step by step so you can achieve this no matter your skill level. Let's dive in. I will be drawing on the iPad using the Procreate app version 5.4, and I have my canvas set to 4000 by 3000 pixels at 300 dpi. If you don't have enough storage on your iPad for a file this large, you can use the pre-formatted screen size canvas, which will give you the same aspect ratio, but at a smaller size and lower resolution. We're going to be using a limited palette for this illustration, just greens and pinks. If you'd like to use the same colors I'll be using, I've shared the palette which you can import directly into Procreate. Or if you're using a different app, you can pull the hex codes from the color card I created for you. If you're new to drawing, or if you just want a shortcut to make the process easier, I've also created a template for you to use as a guide. There's a link in the description for all of these free downloads. But if you're one of my email subscribers, be sure to check your inbox because I've already sent you the template and color palette. Before we start drawing, I'd love if you'd like, comment, subscribe, and watch till the very end because it really helps the channel. Okay, if you plan to use a template, let's import that first. Go to the Actions menu, tap Add, tap Insert a Photo, and if you've already downloaded and saved the template, find it in your camera roll and tap to import. Now on the template, this central shape is the basic structure for the cottage. The circles and lines are where we're going to place our flowers and stems, and of course these are the cloud shapes in gray. So we're going to turn the opacity down on the template layer so it's visible but not too distracting. And then we're going to create a new layer above it. Now choose your favorite sketching pencil. I'm going to be using Huntsman, which is in the Procreate library in the pencil set. And let's start with the house. First, we're going to follow these lines in the lower section for the main part of the house. And then we're going to draw another diagonal line parallel to this right side. And you're going to want this line to be slightly offset, so make it a little higher. And then at the bottom, you're going to draw a diagonal line to connect the two. So we're just basically giving our house some dimension. Now we're going to follow the triangle shape at the top for the roof, but we're going to make it curved inward slightly. So rather than drawing a straight line, just give it a slight curve. And you're going to want that line to extend a little bit beyond the lower section of the house. So just like we did here, we're going to add another line to the right of that. And this will be offset too. So it'll start a little bit lower this time. Just try to follow the same shape as best as you could. Now at the top, we can connect the two with a straight line. And at the bottom, rather than drawing another straight line, we can draw a couple curves or a wavy line to give the roof a scalloped edge. Now on the left side, we're going to double this line. You don't want it to be too thick, but you want to just give a little bit of dimension to the roof on this side, and then add a curve to connect it to the house. And then at the top, you can add a little curve to connect it to the other side. You might have to adjust the connection at the top as well. Then we can add a chimney to the left side. So basically you're just drawing a fairly skinny rectangle. And then you can just add a cap to the top, which is just a horizontal rectangle. And on the right side, we can add a few curves for the shingles. You're just going to want to draw these kind of like fish scales. So if you have two, the next row will just have one in the center of those two, and so on and so on. Don't need to be too precise though. Now let's add a few details to our cottage. Feel free to stylize this however you'd like. I'm going to add just one door in the center, and I'm angling my lines so that they match the angle of the house. And I'll curve the door at the top. Then I'm going to add a small attic window above the door. And I'll have this curved at the top as well. Add a little windowsill. Maybe a few horizontal lines to indicate wood planks. Then let's add a curvy plume of smoke coming from the chimney. It's easier to draw big curves if you use a really loose grip and use your entire arm. And you may have to draw several lines until you get the shape to look the way you want it. And then finally, I'm going to add a few paving stones to create a curved path from the front door. So I'm going to offset each one to the left and then make my way back to the right. All right, there's our little cottage. Okay, let's tackle the surroundings. The plants and flowers and the clouds will all overlap the house in some areas. So let's do these on a new layer. So let's create a new layer. And we're going to follow the lines of the cloud on the left side. And we're going to use this curve on the cloud as the base for the leaves and flowers. So it's going to kind of act like a hill. So just first draw the lines for the stems. And as you can see, this one will overlap the roof slightly. Then you're going to draw a flower inside each of the circles. Again, you can stylize these however you'd like. I'm just going to keep the shapes really simple. Then you can add a few small leaves along the stems. Now we've got some open space here on the left, so let's add a couple large leaves there. You can start with a central line and basically just add an almond shape around it. I'm going to make this one curved to the left a little. All right, then we need to add a flower to the circle on the right. If you struggle to draw flowers, you can start with 5 lines in kind of a starfish shape. So one in the center, 2 angled upwards, and then 2 angled downwards. Then you can add your petals around each of those lines. And that's just a really quick and easy way to get a simple 5-petal flower. Then you can erase the guidelines and just add a circle in the center. Now there's lots of empty space on the right side as well, so let's add 2 giant leaves. As I mentioned in a previous tutorial, playing with scale just adds an extra element of whimsy in your illustrations. Then to fill this space, we can have a second leaf curving down toward the cloud. All right, now we're going to add a crescent moon between the 2 leaves to fill that space. Here's a really quick and easy way to draw one. First, we're going to create a new layer. Then you're going to draw a circle and keep your pencil down so that it snaps to a clean shape. If it's more of an ellipse than a circle, tap ellipse at the top of the screen, then tap circle to change the shape into a perfect circle. Now you're going to go to that layer, swipe left, tap duplicate, and while you're on that duplicated layer, go up to the transform tool, and you're going to make that second circle smaller and move it to the right so it intersects the first circle to create the crescent shape. Adjust the size if you need to. Move it around until you like your crescent shape. Once you're pleased with the position and the shape of your crescent, go ahead and tap the transform tool again, go to the layers panel, and pinch those 2 layers together to merge them. Then you can use your eraser tool to erase the extra lines you don't need. While we're on this layer, we can draw the second cloud since it will intersect this flower, and it will be helpful to keep those 2 layers separate. And then the last thing we can do is add a few dots for the stars. So you're just going to randomly place those around the house and even a little bit below the clouds as well. All right, there's our sketch. Now let's select all 3 of those sketch layers and group them. And we're done with the template, so we can turn that layer off. Now we can move on to color. The brush I'll be using is a slightly textured brush from the Pastels set. To find it, open up the brush library. We're in the Procreate library. Go to the Pastels set, and we're going to be using Meadowbank. For now, we're going to turn off 2 of the sketch layers so that only the layer with the house is visible. We're going to reduce the opacity on that layer. Let's close that sketch group, create a new layer, and drag it below the sketch group. And as I mentioned before, we're using a limited palette of just greens and pinks, and there were way too many greens for me to come up with names for each one, so I kept it simple and just numbered them. So as you can see, there are 5 different shades of green for the house. Go ahead and choose House Green 1. Let's outline the shape of the house and the chimney. Starting with my brush at a fairly small size, just so that I can get all those lines. Then increase the brush size and fill the shape manually in order to preserve the texture of the brush. You can decide how textured or how smooth you want this to look. If you continue to add more and more strokes, the texture will smooth out a bit. But if you just use a light layer of color, you'll see a lot of that texture show through. Go ahead and add color to those stepping stones as well. Now let's turn on Alpha Lock on that layer, switch the color to House Green 2, and add that darker color to the right side of the house. With Alpha Lock on, we don't have to worry about coloring outside of the shape, so you can be pretty loosey-goosey with this. Then you can also add a line of shadow that will fall under the roof line on the right side, as well as on this side. And let's also add a little shadow along the right side of the chimney. And then we can actually add a little bit of shadow along the right side of the door. So just have it extend just past the outline of the door. Now let's switch the color to House Green 3. And we're going to darken the shadow on the right side, right under the roof, and a little bit along the right edge. While we've got this dark color pulled up, let's go ahead and also add color to the inside of that window. And actually, let's also add the horizontal lines. Keep in mind that you don't want to be too heavy-handed with this part, otherwise it'll look like we're painting stripes on the house. So reduce the brush size and keep your pressure really light. And it works well if you leave some of the lines incomplete. You just really want this to be nice and subtle. Remember to turn Alpha Lock off on that layer, and let's create a new layer above it. We're going to choose House Green 4 from the palette. And we're going to use this light green for the roof. So again, just outline and then fill that shape. And let's also use this color for the chimney cap and the front door. And this is a good time to actually just turn the sketch off for a minute and make sure your shapes look the way you want them to. Clean up any areas that you feel need to be cleaned up. And while the sketch is off, I'm also going to add a line of highlight to each of those paver stones. Turn the sketch back on. And then let's choose House Green 5. Now we're going to use this darker color to add the shingles on the roof. And I'm doing this on the same layer as the lighter green. But if you feel more comfortable, you can do this on a separate layer. And I really want to see how that is looking. So I'm going to turn the sketch off for a second. We can add a little more color to each of those shingles just to give them a little bit of definition so they don't look quite so two-dimensional. Then we can add a line of the darker green along the bottom edge of the roof line on the left, as well as along the bottom edge of the chimney cap. And that darker green will also go here where this curve meets the house, because technically that would be in shadow. Now let's add a little detail to the door. I'm just going to add a few lines, like if it's a wooden door. I think that's all we need this color for. Let's add the doorknob in a darker color. So switch back to house green 3, drop the brush size down fairly small and add that little doorknob. And we also need to add our window frame. So let's turn the sketch back on, switch to pink 4, and the brush size should still be pretty small. And let's add the frame around that window, as well as the windowsill. All right, now let's add color to that plume of smoke. So we're going to switch the color to light gray, and we're actually going to do this on a new layer. So create a new layer above, and we're just going to outline and fill that shape. Let's turn the sketch off for a second just to see how everything's looking. I'm going to switch the eraser tool to Meadowbank as well and just clean up the shape of my smoke plume. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. Now, the other thing we're going to do on this smoke layer is reduce the opacity to about 60%. So you should now have 3 layers for the house. Go ahead and select all 3 of those layers and group them. Now we can turn back on our sketch group. We're going to turn off the sketch layer with the house and turn on the second sketch layer with the plants and flowers. Go ahead and reduce the opacity on that layer. You're going to create a new layer and drag it below the house group. Now let's ink the stems for these flowers. So choose house green 3. Make sure the brush size is fairly small. I've got mine set to about 4 or 5%. And you're just going to follow those shapes. All right, now change the color to leaf green 1, and let's go ahead and ink the large leaves. Remember, we're on a layer below the house and the smoke plume. And because we reduce the opacity on the smoke layer, it looks transparent. So we can see a muted view of the leaf behind it. Now choose leaf green 2, then go to that leaf layer and turn on alpha lock. Let's also turn the sketch off temporarily so that we can see what we're doing. So we're going to add this darker green to each leaf. So I'm basically just drawing a curve and filling one side of the leaf with the darker green. It'll be a little harder to see behind the smoke here, but that's okay. Now we can switch to leaf green 3. Make sure you drop your brush size down fairly small, and we'll add a line down the center of each of those leaves. Don't forget to turn off alpha lock and turn your sketch back on. Now create a new layer and drag it above the house group. Change the color to pink 1, and we're going to outline and fill all of the flowers. As always, it's easier to create the outlines with your brush at a smaller size, then increase the brush size to fill the shape. Now here where we're covering a bright color over a dark color, you might just want to make the color a little bit more solid in these areas so that the dark green doesn't show through. Now switch to pink 2 and add a large circle in the center of each of those flowers. Then switch to pink 3. And we're going to add a little detail inside each of those circles. I'm just going to kind of mirror the flower shape, but you can choose to draw dots or lines, whatever works best for you and your style. Just make sure that some of the dark pink still shows through. If you need to, you can turn the sketch layer off so that you can better see where things are being positioned. And we're not doing a whole bunch of shading or anything, but with the same light pink, you can add a couple lines of highlight to some of the petals. All right, go ahead and turn the sketch back on and switch the color to pink 4. We're going to outline this cloud shape and then increase the brush size quite a bit to fill because we want to see some of that nice texture from the brush. Of course, we don't want our clouds to have such a solid line along the bottom edge. So switch to the eraser tool and make sure that that's also set to Meadowbank. And we're going to increase the brush size on that quite a bit. It would also be helpful to turn the sketch back off for a second. So what we're going to do is just gently erase this bottom edge. And we're using circular motions here because, again, you want to avoid having a straight line. You can erase a little higher up towards the center and these edges here. Now it's okay that we can see part of the house and the stepping stones showing through, but we don't want to see these stems. So let's go back to the leaves layer, reduce the size of the eraser quite a bit. I've got this down to about 8 or 9%, and then erase those parts of the stems we don't want to show through. All right, so we're done with that second sketch layer, so we can turn that off and then turn on the third sketch layer with the moon, stars, and the second cloud. Let's reduce the opacity on that third sketch layer. Then create a new layer and make sure that you drag it above the flowers layer. And we've still got the color set to pink 4. First, we're going to outline and fill the second cloud. And we're going to follow the same process. So switch to the eraser tool and then just gradually erase that harsh edge along the bottom. Now we don't want this flower to show through too much, so don't erase too high. Now let's change the color to pink 3, and then we're going to outline and fill the moon. I'm just going to turn off the sketch to make sure that that shape looks good. And finally, we can add the stars. So change the color to house green 3. And you're going to want to drop the brush size down quite small for this and add those dots. Make sure to vary the size so that it feels nice and random. You don't want it to look too much like a predictable polka dot pattern. So you can change how much pressure you use as well as changing the size. All right, let's turn the sketch off and we're all done. There's our cute little cottage in the clouds. I really hope you had fun with this process. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and I'd love to see your version, so I invite you to share your artwork in the community feed. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.